Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today at the Climate Integrates Climate and Energy Policy Seminar Issues Surrounding Renewable Energy as a Main Power Source. My name is Ayako Sakurada, an ACC announcer, and I'll be your MC during today's program. Tokyo, Japan, the cold rain has stopped, and we see some sunlight from different places, both in and out of the country. We have the audience. Thank you very much for your kind participation. Today, simultaneous interpretation service is provided. And please use the receiver at your desk and turn it on and make a selection of the channel. Japanese is channel 1 and channel 2 for English. And please select your appropriate channel. Climate Integrate is a climate policy think tank that communicates with a wide range of actors to achieve decarbonization with a focus on presenting the facts and delivering the facts. This year is an important year for formulation of the Basic Energy Plan, the Global Warming Prevention Plan, and new greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for 2030 and beyond. Emission reduction targets for 2030 and beyond the draft will be expected to be presented by the end of the year. In order to have a dialogue for those concerned, we held a seminar in July this year on energy policy issues in order to facilitate a wide-ranging discussion among stakeholders on this important policy decision. The seminar covered the many topics, and it was quite meaningful. And today, we are focusing on renewable energy sources. And we hope that your understanding on renewable energy sources will be deepened. And there are some housekeeping announcements before the seminar. As for Wi-Fi, please refer to this QR code. And details are mentioned on this paper. And during this seminar, we will be entertaining questions from the audience in the hall as well as those connected via online. And please enter your questions or comments via QR code. And because of the time limitation, we may not be able to answer to all the questions. And you're kindly asked to fill out the questionnaire after the seminar. We will inform you again after the seminar. Now we'd like to move on to the seminar. In the first part of the session, there will be 3 speakers giving their presentations. And please refer to the screen and website for the profiles of the speakers. And through QR code, we will be receiving your comments or questions. First, Mr. Hiroyuki Yasui, a Director of Public Policy at Climate Integrate, will give a general overview of the key issues for greening electricity, the points of argument regarding making renewable energy as a main power source. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yasui, Public Works Sector of Climate Integrate. Those of you in the audience as well as those connected on the web, thank you very much for joining us. The topics of today's seminar is points of argument regarding making renewable energy as a main power source. There may be no disagreement that renewable energy is necessary to achieve decarbonization targets. But on the other hand, there are various discussions on how far and how to promote renewable energy. The government is announcing the policy of making a renewable energy as a main power source. And in order to go ahead with the policy steadily, the I has organized the issues surrounding the shift to renewable energy as a main source of power into 4 strengths that support the supply capacity of renewable energy and 4 benefits to the society as a whole that will result from the shift. And please refer to the material later on. First of all, we would like to discuss the 4 benefits of the shift to renewable energy as the main source of power for our national interests, economy, and livelihood. The following topics will be looked at each of the following areas: energy security, strengthening energy security, realizing a decarbonization society, and economic growth. Japan is heavily dependent on fossil fuel imports. It faces the risk of uncontrollable price hikes. Please refer to the right top chart. It may be difficult to read. This bar graph shows the result of the import of fossil fuels into Japan. And in 2022, fossil fuel imports swelled significantly due to soaring fuel prices and a weak yen. And in 2022, the import value of fossil fuel has gone up from 4 to 6 trillion yen to 12 trillion yen in 2022. And the right bar graph, this is from Lawrence Berkeley estimation, and we compiled this chart based upon the figures presented from them. And this starts from 2020. And suppose we can achieve the scenario that renewable energy source will account for 70% in 2035, the fuel import can decrease to 0.6 trillion yen. And also, this chart was compiled based upon a Berkeley scenario. The chart on lower right is an estimate of the electricity self-sufficiency ratio. And the electricity sufficiency ratio is defined as a ratio of renewable energy, excluding biomass, from 18% in 2010 to 84% with renewable energy. And second, realization of the decarbonized society. The social and economic losses due to climate change and adverse effects on ecosystem are becoming more and more serious every year. Above right, in addition to destruction of infrastructure and livelihoods due to loss of ecosystems and natural disasters, economic damages to industries such as agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and tourism, reduced productivity of outdoor labor such as agriculture and construction, food security such as food shortages and food price risks, adverse health effects will become more serious. The shift to renewable energy as a main source of power will contribute to the realization of decarbonized society. And solar and wind power are technologies that have already put in practice. According to IRENA, the lead time from planning to start of operation is only 1 to 3 years for solar. And onshore wind power, it is about 5 years for offshore wind power, which allows rapid expansion of installation. As shown in the chart on the lower right, the IEA has shown that the CO2 reduction effect of renewable energy and energy conservation is significant. And next, the vertical axis is a CO2 emission, and the effectiveness in reduction of emission. This shows the use of renewable energy sources and also conservation of energy and so forth. You can see that it will contribute to the reduction. And next, the competitiveness. Japan is depending on fossil fuel up to 70% of the source of energy. And even though the investment in renewable energy is in progress in Japan, we're still lagging behind. And according to the result of 2023, the total investment in renewable energy is 9, and compared with the United States. And it is known that global investment will be towards renewable energy. This is a world energy scenario, an IEA 2050 net zero scenario. According to the scenario, towards the reduction and use of LNG and fossil fuel, it will decline to zero. But for solar and wind power generation, they will exceed the power generated by fossil fuels. And also, according to Wind Power Association and Solar Wind Power Generation, JPEA, there is a tentative calculation that effectiveness and the contribution to the reduction of emission will be higher. And it is possible to lead to strengthening competitive edge. And many of the community in Japan is undergoing declining population. And because of typhoon and earthquake, and the supply of electricity will stop because of those disasters. And we are suffering from those risks. And renewable energy using solar and wind power. And if the citizens will take the initiative in promoting those renewable energy sources, it will be possible to create new jobs in industries. And with the synergy of existing agriculture and other industries, it will be possible for industries to grow together and create resilient society with the renewable energy sources. So the community revitalization can also be realized by the use of renewable energy sources. And those are the 4 benefits.
So next, I'd like to talk about can we really depend on the renewable energy, the strength of supplying power of renewable energy, 4 factors. And renewable energy is variable and cost is higher. So some said this will be difficult to achieve. However, where is the strength in terms of supply capability of the renewable energy? So economic aspect, potential, flexibility, and industrial technology are the 4 benefits. First, economic benefit. And so currently, so the price of imported fossil fuel is going up. In order to suppress that, the government is expending a lot of a subsidy to entities to lower the impact. But the carbon price here in Japan nowadays, compared to the international level, is relatively lower. But coal thermal power or the gas thermal power generation cost compares to that of a PV or wind power generation are on the par or even above that of PV or the wind power generation. Well, on the one hand side, it's a bit busy, but the chart on the one hand side, this is a newly established power plant for different sources. This is estimate made by the Berkeley National Lab, and we made a chart out of their data. So the vertical is power generation cost. 2025 and 2030, 2040, these are compared. And so the power generation cost being plotted depend on the different source. It's very small letters. It's difficult to see, but light gray is gas thermal power and darker gray is the coal thermal power generation. Here, is carbon price, the same as the European peer, and 13,000 yen ton yen per ton CO2 is what is plotted, but it is going to be quite high. And so the dark red, so LNG thermal power. And so the green hydrogen co-fire or single fire, but this level is quite high. 2030 and 2040, you see the co-firing. 2040, what you see is a single firing. So the level is quite high. On the other hand, green is a PV, blue or the wind power generation. Here, well, the PV is quite significant, but continuously the level is continue to come down. And so 2040, you see the pink color bar chart, that's the nuclear. And so because it's a newly established power plant, you only see it here. But 2040, PV and wind will be the cheapest. And so innovation or the scale merit, economic scale will help the cost competitiveness. So economic aspect, you see those benefits on the side of renewable energy. So due to the time constraint, I would like to rush through. So the second part is the potential. And so PV and wind power generation, well, there is a problem of coexisting with the local communities, so speed of deployment is slowing down. However, only the part of the national lands usage and the ocean territory will suffice to increase the deployment. GPS 2050 vision are shown on the right-hand side. If that is delivered, and the ratio of the solar panel proportion to the local to the total land and building, and so only 10%, and the agricultural land 7%, and the nationwide land is only 1%. That is the a proportion of the land secured by the PP to the total land. So it's very small. And so the third is a flexibility. So the PP is a viable renewable energy, and some see that as the disadvantages. But the increasing the flexibility of the power generation system while lowering the cost of renewable energy, this can contribute more. I think this concept does not be well understood. On the right-hand side, what you see is the time, day, and season-based unit output and demand and how they fluctuate. And there are different ways to accommodate such fluctuations from the top to lower parts, and depend on the cost, we plot this way. And so the improving the operations of the market or demand response. And by using those, we can accommodate those fluctuations. And there's other ways to accommodate this. So by having different methodologies combined, we can accommodate this. And the last one is industrial technology. And so procurement of the PV panel depend on overseas. And so the major automotive OEMs are not making theirs here in Japan. There are some issues, but if you look at the chart on the right-hand side, and those major facilities, the percentage of the cost to the total cost is not large, 15% when it comes to the PV power generations. And the parts generation, parts manufacturing, and the installation and maintenance and operation secures a large portion of the business. If we could develop such businesses here in Japan, I think that will contribute to the economic growth of Japan. There's a high potential in that regard. So I'm sorry to rush to the last part, but that's all from me. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yasui, for your presentation. So that was the benefits and strengths being explained. So the next I'd like to follow up from the U.S. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory of U.S., Dr. Shiraishi Kenji. He will be talking about energy security and economic aspect of renewable energy.
Dr. Shiraishi, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming despite the bad weather. As was introduced, I belong to Berkeley Laboratory under a Department of Energy, and I am conducting research on energy. And today I would like to talk about the economics of decarbonization power sources in Japan. When it comes to economic benefit or viability, currently the revision of energy policy is now in progress. For instance, what is the lowest cost of power generation? The comparisons are made: nuclear power, renewable energy sources, and fossil fuel power generation. And without raising the cost, how should the numerous decarbonized power sources be combined to achieve zero CO2 emissions at the lowest cost? For instance, including CCS and use of hydrogen, there are many ways of coming up with the source of power, and we have to respond to those questions. And I think you can agree that we should consider those elements. And LCOC, that is the cost of power generation. I would like to talk about what LCOE is all about, and when this can be used and when this cannot be used. And as Mr. Yasui just mentioned, on our part, we conducted calculations. So I would like to show you the result of calculation. Going beyond LCOE, in order to proceed with a decarbonization in power generation, just working on those matters related to LCOE may not be enough. So I'd like to refer to that later on. Maybe you're already aware of how the system works. This is the electric power systems with different components. Power is generated, delivered to a bulk, and that is transmission. And then the electricity is distributed to the users. So when we say a cost of power generation, it doesn't directly lead to the determination of electricity price. And then what will be the installed capacity? The cost of generation accounts for 2/3 of the total cost in electricity rates and distribution, transmission, following power generation in terms of the level of cost. So power generation is very important since the cost for generation is the highest. And going forward, we have to create a power system that does not emit CO2. And the researchers proposed 3 elements. And I think this is a good summary. Number 1 is fuel and CO2 emission. That should be zero. Probably solar power generation and wind power generation will be the main source. And that is not enough. So capacity that can be used for a longer period of time and also adjustment of output is necessary because solar power generation and wind power generation, the output cannot be determined until the moment of a generation. So in worst case, there won't be any sunlight or there won't be any wind at all. We can assume that. Suppose the environment is as such, we need to support the supply of electricity in such condition. And when electricity is necessary, well, it is typical that electricity is not enough. But sometimes even the power is not so much required, there excess generation. So appropriate balancing is required. So flexible and prompt balancing is required. So these are the three factors. And the degree of importance varies from factor to factor. And in power generation, number one is the most. The 75% is solar and wind power, and farm energy sources accounts for 25%, and biomass geothermal 13%, and nuclear 12%. And the battery 135 gigawatts. So in terms of LCOE, we're just looking at number one. In power generation cost, LCOE, that is number one, has to be reduced. Otherwise, the generation cost will not come down. So basically, it is necessary to increase the source of power significantly. And even with such main power source, I suppose number two and number three are available that should come into being. So levelized cost of electricity, and simply this is explained as a generation cost. And as for a newly established power plant, that is assumed, and model plant is assumed, bearing in mind the operation will last for another 30 years or 40 years. So the unit is yen per kilowatt hour. And at METI, the Agency of Natural Resources and Energy is coming up with calculation and using the latest figures and data, we conducted calculation. Construction cost for solar and wind power are considered, and the costs are on the decline every year. And also utilization rate, and this varies in different regions because as in some areas, there are more sunny days or windy days. And also, we're using the latest data for the nuclear power plants construction cost, and LNG and coal prices are kept. And the most recent prices are used, and facility utilization rates for various types of thermal power generation are set based on studies, and hydrogen is set from various literature values for green hydrogen. And the dollar yen rate, $1 is set at 150 yen based on recent price movements. And to calculate pure generation costs, policy costs, and decommissioning costs are not included. And this will be the result from 2025 to 2040. More renewable energy sources, mainly solar and wind power, will be used. And the 10 years difference is shown here. And there is a wide gap, and because regionality is seen for solar power and wind power, that is why it has a very wide range. And we will be introducing from the left side solar power. This is newly established facility, and there is a contradiction because we are trying to achieve decarbonization. So is it really appropriate to introduce a newly established LNG power plant or a coal fire plant? And another direction is hydrogen, co-firing with hydrogen. And the raw material will be brought from overseas and produce that in Japan. And the cost is very high as 40 yen. And nuclear power plant, currently the cost is high, but probably it will go beyond the 20 years path.
The offshore wind, one of the renewable energy source, is the treasure for us, and there's a lot of potential. This is our calculation, 2,000 gigawatts and above. And those high quality sources are abundant, especially the location-wise. And so not the bottom mount floating are the most of the cases. So going for the floating type of offshore wind is the key. So as for the quality, Hokkaido, quality is high, it says, of course, but when it comes to usage of the power generated, Chubu, Tokyo, Kansai, those are the major consumer markets. It has to be close to that. And so those are so-called section. So those are the key area we have to keep in mind. And so if we have a optimization model run, and then Hokkaido will not be a part of that. So only the adjacent location close to those major markets. And so those 2040, those location within the circle, the level of the cost will be lower than the 10 yen per kilowatt. So reliability, well, the nuclear, well, if the cost is good, and of course it is reliable, but France case 1.6 trillion yen per gigawatt. And so 2 trillion yen in bulbs and 4.2 trillion yen per gigawatts. And so it used to be 200 billion or 400 billion, but nowadays it's multiple times higher. So how to avoid cost overrun or how to lower the LCOE for the nuclear power generation is the key. If you look at the most recent projects in the major countries, the thermal power plant, it will emit CO2. That is true. And if we restrict CO2 emission, and capacity factor is going to come down to 10 to 20%. And renewable energy, if that is deployed, and so market competitiveness-wise, variable renewable energy will surpass that of thermal. And so demand and output balance is the key. And so, but either way, the capacity factor for the thermal power plant is going to be lower. So when you consider that 0.2 to 0.4 will be the range, and when you do the calculation. And so the fuel cost is also critical here. As I said earlier, well, for the past 5 years, actual figures are used to do the calculation of LNG cost. But 20 yen or above is the result that I get. Hydrogen, well, 2040 is quite high still. So even if we use 40, come down to 40, and so if the demand supply is quite tight, and so the spot price is over 100 yen, and this can be only used at those critical stages to make it more economic sense. And so power generation cost, as I said, on the left-hand side, those box on the left-hand side, if you expand this box a little bit, a storage battery or output control element or the capacity or the adjustment power or the interconnecting lines. And if you calculate the system cost, and that is a system cost calculation. And so our team is looking at the all these power system around the world to do this. So a stable power supply, it should not be compromised. So no outage of the power. So that is an assumption. And so with that in mind, and so we applied many restrictions to minimize the cost and what would be the one, and also what would be the case where the CO2 emission is zero. So we place such restrictions, CO2, and so interconnectivity, and CO2 storage memory, and investments, and those output and optimize. Those are the factors we considered. And so most strict stage. This is a supply-demand tight situation. That's how this operations, and 140,000 hours of a calculation is what I've done. So under this cost calculation, and so interconnecting lines and the storage battery cost to the total cost is minor, but we consider that cost as well to do the calculation. So the system cost, storage battery, or the output, a step up or step down, that cost associated with that is going to include, if the ATN is a power generation cost and system cost, will absorb those upswing. So integrating cost to be included in this calculation. And so in summary, and so the power generation cost is majority of the power tariff. And so this is a quite often used LCOE concept. That is good, but we need to focus on the power generation with the least LCOE, but that alone is not good enough. So, so out of those four factors, remaining three factor needs to be used to complement. So the system calculation is a bit complicated, but with a transparency in mind and with quantitative factors in mind, and we should evaluate different pathways. And so this is the reference literature's graphs that I shared with you today come from these sources. So please take a look at them if you have time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shiraishi. In concerning economic viability of the power generation of the OC has to be considered. And next, let us call upon Mr. Masashi Komurasaki, Mayor of Ikoma City of Nara Prefecture. He will be talking about the issues and significance of renewable energy from the standpoint of local government. I came from Ikoma City. My name is Komurasaki, and I used to work for Environment Ministry, and I have been in charge of the automotives and so forth. It's been 10 years since I became mayor of Ikoma City. And I would like to talk about the perspective of decarbonization from local government point of view. And if a citizens' initiative is necessary, what will be the requirement, and also how the local government can facilitate the move towards use of renewable energy source. And this Ikoma City is commuter city located in suburbs, residents, and also the mountainous area. It consists of those region, and it is rather different from other rural or suburban cities because some are engaged in biomass power generation in the mountainous area. I used to work for environmental agency or ministry, but the local government and national government are very different. And looking at the municipalities, I wonder if it is all right to talk about the fact that people's interest is not so much on renewable energy sources or decarbonization. They're most concerned about the disposition of waste and the annual average of daily mean temperature has gone up. In 1993, 14.3 degrees. And in August, on annualized basis, the temperature has gone up by 2 degrees or 3 degrees. And we can feel that it is getting hotter compared with the past. And also, the health hazards due to heat stroke is on the rise. And when I was working for the ministry, there were very few cases in which the natural disaster headquarters were established to cope with the aftermath of the disaster. But Ikoma is surrounded by the mountain, and we hardly ever have a natural disaster, but still we see increased occurrence of very strong weather. And sometimes we ask the citizens what will be the most important topics for you. Will people answer like healthcare and so forth? And very few people answers decarbonization. And if we say decarbonization is necessary, no one will raise objection. But very few people put priority in decarbonization. In Ikoma, there are many people who have awareness in the importance of environment, and there are some citizens having objection towards establishment of power plant using fossil fuel. And sometimes we have to have misleading information because the awareness towards decarbonization is not very high. And also they're interested in security, safety, disaster prevention, traffic, and firefighting. And even though we try to promote environmental awareness, decarbonization, or a low emission of CO2, it is very hard. It is very hard to reduce CO2 emission in residential area because mostly the emission comes from automobiles and also residential sector. So even though we make every effort, the emission level does not come down. So how we can involve people in the city and also surrounding people to be involved in decarbonization initiatives. And the Noto Peninsula earthquake happened, and also Tonankai draft, a warning was issued, and we tried to tie those issues to other challenges and how we can consider those issues with other issues such as low birth rate, aging population, and so forth. And specifically, I would like to introduce some examples. This is Ikoma's Citizen Power Company, decarbonization and local economic revitalization, and the community are the keywords. And together with the regional banks and the cities and also the local companies, well, this person is taking the initiative in establishing Ikoma Citizen Power Company. And probably there is no other companies of this kind that was established in the community. And of course, we acquire new renewable energy resources and promote local production for local consumption of energy. And it is not that electricity rates or the income coming from the sale of electricity will go outside. Only 2 people or 3 people are employed by this company, but they are all Ikoma city citizens, and it may have ripple effect to create local jobs. And the citizens can buy electricity from this entity, so this entity will offer triggers and means for the citizens to consider the environment.
And so the Ikoma city and 100 household are the subscribing to Ikoma Civic Power and buying power from them, so locally produced for the local consumption. And of course, to have shareholders meetings, but the subscribers meeting is also being organized. So what's generated as a profit, how to return, not return to the shareholders is what we have determined. So the profit, of course, some part will be used for the sake of the company, but the remaining portion we will have a discussion how to use like household appliances which are eco-friendly, and then we can disperse it as a subsidies to support the purchase of such devices among the citizens and so on and so on. So that links to the community service. So there is a social aspect to this operation. The biomass power generation plant is going to be set up in Ikoma. So renewable energy ratio and local projection for the local consumption ratio is also went up. And so the FIT based the electricity generated is can also be wholesale to these power companies. So the employing the people from local citizens is also what we have done. So this is similar to what we do. And so suburb, when it comes to suburbs, many people go to the city center to work. And so the circulation in the local city is low, and also electricity bill paid will go outside of the Ikoma city. By using the civic power company, and so we can use it for the making investment into set up a PB and so on and so on. And so we install a lot of PV panels onto household in Ikoma and use the service of local contractors, and that will benefit local businesses, small businesses, and renewable energies and power players. Well, starting from April next year, they are going to start running of this biomass power plants. So that is also the benefit. So as for the municipality, and so municipal power agency should not just focus on the power generation, but should also expand the scope of urban development. It's not just a perspective of administration. It's not going to be like a Stadtwerke of Germany all at once, but I hope that this will be the one entity which contribute to the urban development of Ikoma. So Panasonic, and this is the sharp experts, and so the general citizens and also the senior citizens are also quite active. There are many of them within our city, and so how to support them? Well, if we think in that way, and they just will inactivate it, so we would like to encourage them to actively contribute to the urban development. They may complain that we are using them, but they are actually happy. So if you go to the library daily, and then those senior citizens are reading newspapers, but if you really listen to what they can offer, and some of them do have very high skills, and for those who do have interest in environmental issues, they can come and help. So the Good Life Award and Energy Saving Award of MOE, we have received those awards. So this is the subscribers meetings. So part of the profit generated by this civic hours in energy, they can be decided by the subscribers, not just buying power from them, but from the perspective of urban development, we can also make a commitment. So urban development in Ikoma is not just done by the administrators, but also we involve citizens to come up with the ideas. So this is the community, and you decarbonization initiatives. And so another one, the Ikoma city is recognized as regional decarbonization leader by MOE. So the point is, so existing housing, and so in Tokyo is also promoting the installation of a PV panel to existing household. That is a very newly built houses. That is also important, but there are many existing houses compared to the number of newly built houses. So installing PV panel to the existing houses or encourage them to buy EV and connecting it with the grid has to be considered. Otherwise, CO2 emission reduction from the residential area will not advance. This is the hard work, but installing PV panels to uh, existing houses or introducing battery storage facilities is not so popular, but those are the things we trying to promote. And so I think Ikoma City is one of the few local governments who are trying to tackling this. No other municipality is doing so. And so those grandpa and grandma living in the household of 60 years old, and then when we tried to introduce a baby panel, and then they said they will be dead before the lifetime of a panel is going to reach. And so that will be the very honest opinion of them. So we have to target the existing house up until the 20 years of age. So this is eco-friendly. So please do install this. That message alone will not be convincing to those residents. So economic benefits should be highlighted, like you have a preferential price been offered, or EV or EV as a storage battery, and that's something that can be highlighted. But those senior citizens, they cannot go to the evacuation center at the time of natural disaster, or for those households, they have a pet, the small children, it may be difficult for them to go to the evacuation center. And in other occasions, disaster risk reduction is a major concern for them. But having PV panel installed onto their household will work beneficial for them at the time of disaster. And so if you approach that direction, and then those senior citizens may say yes. So the disaster reduction efforts and the decarbonization, those ideas can be combined. And so decarbonization, disaster risk reduction, a combined approach. So especially there are many who the senior citizens cannot walk to a evacuation center, and sometimes they request them to go to a community center, or they want to stay with their house even during the emergencies. And there will be a problem with the toilet facilities, and also keeping a pet and so on, or even with the people with the physical difficulties. And so we have to keep that in mind when we promote such initiatives. I wanted to introduce one more. This is the book that we released in October. And so linking with the decarbonization, what is significant is the community coexistence. And there is an issue of the outrages on the senior citizens. So all these senior citizens driving is a scary thing for them. In the past, we talked about the long-term care or dementia being concerned among those senior citizens. But currently, the concern of then is transportation, ride share, or the bus operation, or the support for shoppings, and so on and so on. Even if you have a bus transportation service, that will not address everything. And so, having a place for where they can eat or they can stay, and those the place is important for them. If you go to the major cities, there are many of such places. But if you go to the suburbs, or if you go to the regional cities, it takes like 20 minutes by car to go to those community center. But Ikoma City, maybe a 10 minutes or 15 minutes walk, they can go to community center. So infrastructure has to be enhanced so that the people can go to those places without having access to cars. So this is quite unique when it comes to the initiatives. So Machinoreki is the town station. That's the idea we have. And so lastly, well, decarbonization is of course critical. And so, of course, we can approach in a different ways, but we also needs to highlight the importance of a decarbonization straightforward manner, like we do today. And so we have to have an honest discussion with the citizens, of course, that is given. But if you only use the story of decarbonization, it will not be too convincing. And so you need to add other flavors like disaster risk reductions and so on and so on. And so welfare also. So those items that the citizens are most interested in. And then ultimately, by pursuing those interested themes, it also reach to the benefit in terms of a decarbonization. So CO2 reduction nationwide and decarbonization in local municipalities. Well, we cannot forget about addressing CO2 emission in those house residential areas. Of course, we need to support, but our initiatives, like setting up a municipal power agency, is key. Of course, it's not easy, and our agency, of course, it's not so stable when it comes to business operations, and we also employ a few people, and also we only have 100 or so households subscribing to this agency's services, but CO2 reduction initiative coming out of local government like us, we believe that the Ikoma city can be the model case and can be spread throughout other local regions. And so, and when it comes about election, there's also election to determine the chairperson or the president. But discussion coming out of the local government or the focus on the local issues is almost zero. And so our issues were not highlighted by the mass media. So we were very much disappointed at the time of the election. So it's not about Tokyo. There are other local governments who are making efforts, but also struggling with those issues. And so I hope that you can raise decarbonization issue straight ahead, not just focusing on Tokyo, but other local governments. Thank you. I'm sorry for spending too much time, but thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Komurasaki. The decarbonization multiplied by needs. Mr. Komurasaki has explained various initiatives of the program. The second part, Mr. Masahiro Chikushi, Director of Electricity Infrastructure Division of Electricity and Gas Industry Department of Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, METI, will be the panelists, and also Ms. Elizabeth Biermann de Lancie, Economic Affairs Secretary of the Embassy of the United States of America in Japan, will join us. And Hirata will act as the moderator. Ms. Hirata is the Climate Integrates Director. Now, I would like to act as a moderator during the panel discussion. My name is Hirata. Already, we received presentations from the three speakers concerning the points of argument of the use of renewable energy sources as a main power, and the issues and significance of renewable energy from the standpoint of local government was presented by Mr. Komurasaki as well. Now, this year, finally, the plan for green global warming prevention plan and basic energy plan formulation and a new greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for 2030 and beyond will be formulated. And we would like to have deeper discussion on those topics. First of all, we would like to have remarks from the two speakers. you have to attend the deliberation committee after this. Mr. Chikushi, Masahiro Chikushi from METI, the Energy and Natural Resources Agency, and please give the presentation.
Thank you for introduction. My name is Chikushi. Thank you for participating in spite of a very busy schedule. And so Hirata-san, as it was Hirata-san, as I explained earlier at ANRE, and I'm serving as a director as Electricity Infrastructure Division. And so out of all the electricity, and so I cover the power generation, distribution, transmission. And so what is the total demand here in Japan? And also whether we have power sources to meet demand, fuel and source both ways. And so can we manage our division because it's a government work. So the mid-term and longer term range and whether the demand supply situation is going to be okay within 10 or 20 years is what we consider to prepare the initiatives and policies. That is our mission because we are having discussion focusing on the renewable energy, but in our view, and so it has to be the storage energy and it could be the nuclear energy, whatever contributes to the generate the power, even the 1 gigawatt, that is fine. And so carbon neutral, 2050 carbon neutral, that is the government target. And so that is unshakable target. So 2050, when you think about that, and so decarbonize the resources, nuclear or the renewable energy or decarbonize the thermal, of course we need to expand that. Otherwise we will not make this commitment by 2050. That's our position. So as Hirata-san mentioned earlier, the government towards 2040 GX vision, we have that already introduced, and also we have discussion for the 7th strategic energy plan. So year ends to the next year beginning, and so the summary or outline will be presented. And so, well, currently we're having discussion, so I can show some of the aspects that we are covering. And so the position we're having today. So how to position the significance of the factors. So I'd like to talk from the government point of view. So most recently, I have prepared this one-page slide as of October. And so the council meeting for the strategic energy plan and so power systems major direction is what this slide is all about. So the position of UNRE, well, in a way, no change from the past. It's very clear. That's plus 3 is what we call it. So safety needs to be secured, and that is a given, and energy security, and so environmental response, and so economic efficiency. Thus, S plus 3 mission has been upheld for many years now. And so some of you may not know, and that's disappointing, but the oil crisis in 1979, well, that was the when the UNRWA was established. So in that sense, so the shortage of energy here in Japan was concerned, and the price goes up, and people's livelihood was damaged. So to alleviate that, this agency was established. So that mission has not changed over the past 50 years, in a sense. On the other hand, and so experience that we gained over the years, well, if we heavily depend on certain things, that is not good. And because the future is unexpected and difficult to foresee, and Russia could invade Ukraine, and the pipeline could be disrupted or caught fire. So we have to prepare for it, all possible scenarios. So we should not heavily depend on one single thing. And so 2050 neutral carbon neutral needs to be achieved with that in mind. And so the direction for the power system going forward. Well, there are 3 pillars. And so we don't see the screen my slide now, but Japanese wording is different. But those 3 pillars are shown on the left side, and stable supply and decarbonization on the right hand side. And at the very bottom, it's very difficult to say, but this is about the price. And so these are 3 pillars like this. And so what is the topic for this time around when we are coming up with the 7th strategic energy plan? There are two keywords. One, and so power demand continue to grow. And so that is assumption, renewed assumption. So data center is a quite vibrant increase in the number of data centers for the next 10 years. Power demand in Japan likely to grow by 10%. That is the most recent assumption. So meaning that within 30 years, there hasn't been such a case for the past 30 years. So comes as a surprise to the industry participants. So in 10 years' time, power demand is going to grow by 10%. That wasn't something that we had expected in the past. And so power source and grid, well, we did not prepare with that in mind. So we need to change to the system where we can continue to make investment. That is one major challenge. Another one is price. The price is quite sensitive matter. And so the general election took place a few weeks ago. And so there has been a change in the mix of the parties' strength, but cannot mention what will happen, but what is universal to the most of the countries. And if the prices goes up and ruling party suffers, that is the truth. And so, and power price acceptable by the general public is also the hard topic to address. And so that also needs to be addressed under this strategic energy plan. And so subsidy for the electricity and gas is going to restart from January. It has been already reported by the media. But that is a fiscal expenditure of a quite large size. And so the price issue is quite sensitive. And lastly, and so against those two topics, how that strategy can encapsulate those two factors. Well, by 2050, achieving the carbon neutral is a must. So that's something that we are committed. So those topic or the target is achievable. So there may be some adjustment, but how to encourage changing behavior is also the key. That's all from me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'd like to have a presentation on behalf of the US government. And we're always stunned and wonder what will happen in the United States as we receive latest news from the United States. And the topics is renewable energy sources in this session. So we'd like to hear from you, Ms. Elizabeth Biermann Lancie, Economic Affairs Secretary of the Embassy of the United States of America in Japan.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. I'm here today to talk about sort of the story of the US clean energy transition thus far. I will disappoint you up front. I have no secret insights into what is about to happen. I hope you're not shocked by that. I'm happy to take all your questions. It's important for us to know what you want to know, and I will commit to you that when I have the answer, you can have it as well. I think this will be a time where we just have to stay in close touch to make sure that we all have the right information, but I don't have that information about the future yet. But I think we have some trend lines that can help inform. There we go. Sorry, there we go. So today I'm just going to do a few things to set up our conversation because I know that there's a Q&A following. The first is really key figures that illustrate what has been happening recently in the United States. I'll talk a little bit about the economic impact of the public investment that we've seen under some of the bills that the federal government has passed, and then I'll touch briefly on the role of states, which I think is something that is perhaps a little different in the United States, and that may give us a sense of where things can go regardless of US federal government policies. So since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in August of 2022, there have been about $78 billion allocated in public investment. This is U.S. government taxpayer funding, but that has created more than $400 billion in private investment. And the thing that is, I think, unique about the Inflation Reduction Act is that it's a tax credit, not generally a subsidy scheme. What that means is that you can't get a credit if you haven't invested any private funds. And so, and as I'll show in a minute, a lot of those funds have gone towards reinvigorating manufacturing in clean energy in the US or creating new manufacturing industries. And those investments are in physical facilities and things that you can see and touch and perceive that are very tangible. This is all from open source, so I'm happy to share my sources after this meeting, but a Bloomberg analysis shows that about 80% of the Inflation Reduction Act's investment have gone to Republican-controlled districts, or districts that, in terms of voting behavior, lean Republican. And so the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act really are not, they're nationwide, and they have tended to accrue to places where maybe the climate debate sounds a little different. But the clean energy economic benefits, I think, are visible. Toyota and Panasonic have two big investments in the US that they've made since the Inflation Reduction Act in North Carolina and in Kansas. And so that, I think, is an illustration of this. In terms of trend lines, renewable energy deployment continues to grow. This year in April, wind generation exceeded coal-fired generation. There's a lot of analysis out there that shows that US coal plants are becoming rapidly uneconomical, and so that trend based on pure economics is expected to continue. And then 81% of the new electricity generating capacity in the United States this year was from solar and battery storage. According to the Energy Information Agency, natural gas generation is actually expected to fall. And then, for example, in the Northwest region, it's expected to fall next year by 13% because specifically of an increase in hydropower. And solar generation is forecasted to increase in 2024 and 2025. And so these are trend lines that are proceeding apace. So here's just a few figures to illustrate what I'm talking about. This is from the Rhodium Group and MIT. This is a clean investment as a share of total private investment. You can see how that has increased even before the Inflation Reduction Act, and then accelerated increase after the passage of the act. You can see here how investment in clean manufacturing compares to investment in oil and gas production in this slide. And then here you see also, this is Rhodium Group, MIT, where that investment has gone. And of course, batteries are the overwhelming recipient, but there's also significant investment in zero emission vehicles, critical minerals, hydrogen electrolyzers, and others. So maybe to talk a little bit about the way that the US operates that may be different than other countries. US states have significant ability to make their own policies, and have for a long time. And so when President Trump left the Paris Agreement during the first Trump administration, 24 governors created a climate alliance and proceeded to collaborate with each other on emissions reduction goals going forward. And that alliance covers 60% of the US economy and 55% of the population. And that alliance is still in existence. I'm not trying to predict what will happen, but there are these institutions that have cropped up to really solidify subnational cooperation, which is very significant. The other thing that is interesting in the United States is that you're not seeing a trend where only fossil fuel scarce places are investing in renewables. It's not a choice that is made out of scarcity. And so, for example, in 2024, the state of Texas, which is famous for its oil and gas production, deployed more renewable energy than California. Again, nationwide solar generating capacity is growing fastest in Texas. I also saw a statistic that one of the reasons prices are low and electricity prices are low in Texas is actually because of the solar capacity. So it provides resilience against fluctuating gas prices because you have that solar capacity that's being built out in Texas. So there's a real household benefit that Texans are seeing. And then US states have a lot of different tools they can use to, from a policy level, drive their own clean energy transitions. For example, the state of New Mexico, which is after Texas, the second largest producer of oil and gas in the United States, is working on a clean fuel standard. Their stated goal is to have the cleanest barrel of oil and the cleanest gas in the country, and they are creating government policies at the state level to push that forward. And then lastly, so here's some of the tools I was illustrating. California has a clean energy procurement mandate that Shiraishi-san and I can go into if there's interest. There are voluntary carbon markets at the state level. Lots of different states and cities have incentives for households to put solar panels on their roofs. And then there can be these energy standards as well. One last point, I think, is also the role of companies, which is really important. Lots of US companies have their own emissions reduction goals. And if you look at the timing of those did not all happen after the Inflation Reduction Act was passed or even after President Biden was elected. So there's an interesting dynamic of who leads and who follows. And for example, Microsoft's date back to 2009, Amazon 2019, Disney was in early 2020, and then Apple had its first emissions reduction goals established in 2015, and then updated them to make them more ambitious in 2020 before that election that year. So you're really not seeing a strong correlation necessarily between the federal government signals and the private sector because of I think the private sector sensing a momentum and wanting to lead with that momentum. So I'm happy to be challenged on all of those points, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you. So including Ms. Elizabeth, what's going to happen to US, so we need to look forward to. And so she talks about what was initiative centering around renewable energy in the US. And so now with this member, I would like to talk more deeper into the renewable energy. And so many people have already posed questions using this QR code. And so all the panelists are looking at the questions, and so we'll be entertaining those questions later on. And so you can press and and if you like some of the questions. And so energy strategy going forward here in Japan. Well, let's talk about that first. And as Mr. Chikushi said, a stable supply of energy and decarbonization, achieving this, and also costs and economic benefit to be enjoyed. And so you show the chart to show all these points, and I'm sure that everyone agree with the viability of that. But the role which can be played by the renewable energy in that scenario will be. And so Climate Integrate summarizes this paper. And so we believe that the renewable energy do have a strength. However, here in Japan, I don't think very many people do fully understand the benefits or the strengths of renewable energy. So first, I'd like to talk about that. And so economic benefit first, as Shiraishi-san talked about, Dr. Shiraishi mentioned based upon his research. So in your research, 2030 or towards 2040, and so penetration is going to expand. So cost of the renewable energy will come down in terms of LCOE, but the fuel cost inclusive, you show that cost of renewable energy will come down. But into the discussion held at the government council, but the renewable energy is costly, and it is decarbonization is important, but the cost is high for the renewable energy. Because of that, as renewable cost is high LCOE energy source, so there has to be a good balance. So those are the words we often see in a document issued by the government. So increasing the percentage of renewable energy, how can we lower the cost? Or is it possible to promote renewable energy with the lower cost or the cost competitiveness? Anyone can start, but if you could add, Dr. Shiraishi, please start. And also, Mr. Chikushi, if you want to talk about the government position, also you could also explain more. Thank you for the question. So first, the cost perspective. Well, maybe this is not communicated well in a way. So looking at the document issued by the government recently, renewable energy itself, they're not saying that, well, the cost of renewable energy is high. That tone of communication is more vague because it's coming down. So 2020, 2021, different story. But most recently, the cost of renewable energy is coming down as far as trend is concerned. Of course, the cost here in Japan is not as low as overseas, but the trend is coming down. So the government believes that it will continue to come down. So as it will come out in Q&A, and so decarbonize the thermal compared to that cost, it will be different. So it is covered in various places. So renewable energy alone, well, cost is coming down and expected to come down more. So there's no objections to that. So objection would be, well, renewable energy alone will be difficult to secure the energy security for stability, because if it's rain, PV cannot work as we expected, and wind power, sometimes there's no wind, so time to time there is the difficulty in generating power. And so we need to have a certain level of thermal power plants to be remained, because the operating hour, if it come down, and then the cost will come up per kilowatt basis. So in a total cost base, well, it's not going to be a really low cost overnight. So as Shiraishi-san said earlier, as a system as a whole, and we need to think about the optimum picture. So can we have a nuclear presence to a certain extent? And so decarbonization, can we use a CCS more? Or renewable energy? Well, of course, there's PV, but there's rooftop ones, but can we use it on a wall install type of PV panels and so on and so on? And so since you asked, I would like to continue. So with regard to the renewable energy, cost is one major factor, but well, we need to have a clear pathways to secure quantity, in my view. That is also important. So wind power generation, deployment, well, as Mr. Komurasaki Mayor talked about the community engagement, sometimes a project face difficulty due to the engagement with the community. And so offshore wind, we do support because of the interconnected line, but local community and coexisting with the local community, it's not that easy. So time and effort is required to go ahead with such projects. So the ways to go forward, that approach needs to be optimized. And so if the cost is right, of course, it's easy to deploy, but due to those engagement issues, may not go smooth. So we need to think creatively. So those are this is some of the concern that we have. So I'd like to ask Mr. Shiraishi, Dr. Shiraishi. Thank you. And so METI's materials, if you read carefully, so what's being covered by the mass media or what's being voiced by speakers, it's a slightly different from what I see in the documents issued by the government. It's difficult to say. And so renewable energy cost is coming down, and domestic made hydrogen is good. So those are indicated in a document. And so the narrative coming out from the mass media sometimes doesn't correspond to what I see in a document issued by the government. So the cost-wise. So one thing we should not forget about is, for now, well, CO2 emission, well, when you generate waste, we do not pay much attention to the cost associated with the treatment of the waste. So 10,000 yen per ton and so on and so on. So emitting CO2. In the past, we don't have to pay for the treatment, but nowadays we need to pay to remove or reduce the CO2 emission. So now we are in an era of doing so. So we have to think about the cost with that factor in mind. Because that's not, if we don't do so, it's not apple to apple comparison. So the Texas example, the mentioned by the Ms. Elizabeth was interesting. So Texas, wind power, well, they are number one by far in US, and PV and battery storage. Next to California, Texas is number two. So, and Texas policy, if you read it, there's no mentioning of the climate change. But the actual status is that they are increasing renewable energy. So meaning that they have a good policy, although the state is not supporting, but there's abundant resources and it's cost competitive and they're using it for the optimal way. So that is encouraging case. Maybe we can do the similar things here in Japan. So without thinking about the carbon cost competitive and abundant power source, I think there's a potential for that. And as Chikushi-san said, securing the quantity, well, I do calculate the different patterns. Cost is not the issue no longer. So interconnection could be the issue. Although you have a very good source, it not be capitalized on because cost bearing for the interconnection is that everything is borne by the entities. That's why it has difficulties. And so after the transmission, distribution is not being prepared in terms of infrastructure. It's not about the cost, what makes it difficult to deploy. The third point.
But the third point is, despite that, compared with other international standard, the cost in Japan is high. I'm wondering why that is, but still I have not come to the right answer. The scale of economy is not big enough in Japan, so we have to be serious in reducing the cost, for instance, rationalization and so forth. Thank you very much. Elizabeth mentioned the situation of renewable energy in the United States and transition. Renewable energy is inexpensive compared with fossil fuel power generation. And already in cost, the cost for the use of renewable energy sources is declining even before the administration, former administration. Is it because you have excellence in economic or economy? The scale of economy is there in the United States, and as a driver to disseminate renewable energy sources, is it because the United States has excellence power in terms of economic strength?
Okay, There we go. I think it depends on the area, but I think one of the I was listening to a podcast that I'm going to send around so people can listen to it. It's very interesting. It was live from COP. It was representatives from California and from New Mexico, and they were talking about some of the challenges that still remain in an increasing renewable energy in the United States. And they were talking about some of the regulatory challenges, like the permitting challenges, some of the things that still make it difficult and make renewable energy projects take a long time. And so even in spite of these people's political affiliations, they were saying, maybe some of the deregulation would be good, because then maybe you can skip over some of these steps and permitting and all these obstacles become less prevalent. And so I think there's a possibility that in some places the answer lies in lack of local regulation that makes it just easier to build stuff. In Texas, apparently, it's easy to build things. It's a state that has generally for infrastructure made it fairly easy to build things. So that may be part of the explanation, though I don't live in Texas, so I would defer to people who do. And I think there's also just a lot of sense of private sector opportunity and the desire to give consumers choice. And so I think a lot of people in the US are very excited about making their own electricity. They're proud of it. They have solar panels on their roof, and then they charge their EV with it. And it's just, it is something that consumers across the United States are leaning into, and that is, I think, has become a competitive advantage. And those are not neatly aligned with your personal politics. Some of that is related to self-reliance. If you live in a place where you have one line to the grid, but you have a lot of sunshine, you probably want a solar panel on your roof for your own resilience. So the US is full of these extremely remote areas where this kind of self-reliance in practical terms is quite meaningful. But I don't have a nationwide answer, and I'm not sure there is one.
Yes, we cannot just talk about economic meaning, and it is probably difficult to maintain the excellence just by the scale of economy. For instance, there are various factors, for instance, fluctuating prices of energy sources. So we cannot just make a simple comparison. So other external factors in terms of economic matters are not necessarily reflected in the trend of the cost of a renewable energy. Well, I notice that thing, but looking from a regional perspective, maybe things are different. It is not the matter of expensive or inexpensive. The circulation of economic activities was pointed out in the presentation as well. The citizens are suffering from a rising electricity cost, and they want to have electricity price coming down, and they're looking for new energy sources. But if the cost is high, they may not choose that way. So from the community perspective, what can we hear from you? Thank you. The local government initiatives in standard price, we're trying to offer a little less expensive electricity price to our citizens compared with a large size regions. So we are offering at a lower price. But some people don't care about the price. Maybe 1%, less than 5% population will buy the electricity because that comes from renewable energy sources, even if the cost is high. But I think we have to consider the economic aspect in pursuing the initiative. And resilience is important as well. We talked about disaster prevention, and some citizens would like to buy or generate the power themselves using solar panel on the roof. And that is how they're trying to, cope with the issue of climate change. And I think I am seeing the sign of expansion of such awareness. So not just environment, but also from perspective of disaster prevention, they're trying to be engaged. And so there is one trend that because of the disaster happening more frequently, we have to reduce the emission of CO2. But there's another view in local area, especially in Nara Prefecture, that in the southern part, a major project of solar panel may destroy the nature. So there is a political debate going on vis-a-vis the governor of the prefecture. So this is not related to environment preservation. Sometimes disaster prevention may work better for the installation of renewable energy facilities. Of course, price is a very important factor, but we see different reasons. And before going into the next topics, I would like to continue talking about the cost because this is related to the first question. Basically, generation cost will decline going forward. I think that is a common view. But how are we going to incorporate renewable energy source? That is what we have to consider. And a decarbonization source of power has to be considered, and how to go ahead with a decarbonization, as CCS was referred to, and also co-firing with hydrogen is included in the debate, and also nuclear power generation. And there is a question that use of those power source may be conducive to the decline in the cost going forward. And I would like to have your view concerning the relationship between the cost and such trend. I think from the order of the concept, the renewable energy sources should become the main source of power according to the policy of the government. Now, currently, the fossil fuel accounts for 70% of the total power generation in terms of the fuel, LNG and oil and so forth. And bearing that in mind, bearing the benefits of renewable energy sources, still the situation is such, and the government is trying to promote renewable energy source becoming a main source. And CCS, nuclear power, well, nuclear power leads to decarbonization. And according to the policy of Japan, this will be used as a base source. But in order to offset the fluctuation of renewable energy, probably storage and hydroelectricity will be the only option. And pumping hydro power generation can become an option to incorporate to offset the fluctuation of variation. And I think this has to be considered more. So the utilization rate will come down if we try to make adjustment for the other party. So to what extent they can endure the investors in the power plant. If we do not have any ability to make adjustment, we are not able to take advantage of hydropower and nuclear power and so forth.
So that's not good for anyone. So how to hit the good balance is the key. So what you are reading here is more simple. Hydrogen and ammonia, how to lower those costs. I think that is what it meant. So meaning you, well, first you need to use those hydrogen and ammonia. Well, if we continue to use to a certain extent, the cost will come down. But the challenge of hydrogen and ammonia, even if the cost may come down, to what extent is the doubt that some of you may have. And so looking at the scale of economy here in Japan, well, with here, we cannot tolerate to use every source and try to keep on using until the cost to come down. That's not the case. And so nuclear, well, is cost effective, but we are not making new ones. And hydrogen ammonia is something of the future. CCS, well, demonstration, verification is the only thing that they have done. So how much cost we can save? We have to try and see. So we need to commit to operating or the using. Otherwise, cost will not come down. Thank you. So this question I thought was about it's necessary to lower the cost. That's not the only point of this question, but as of today, hydrogen, ammonia, CCS, the cost of these are high. And nuclear do have its own challenges. And so we should focus more on the renewable energy. And I think that was the point of this question. But whether we're going to choose the ways to lower each of these options, was adjusting power source you mentioned. And so not just power generation cost, but to supplement our variability, how fast we could choose other sources, including the market. And so and the factors are, of course, it is important to lower the cost. Dr. Shiraishi's research result also suggests that. And so, what's remaining will be supported by the battery storage. And so, what is the optimum mix? And so, that will change the role of renewable energy. And so, and so, and some say that that is the reason why the renewable energy cost is high, or some will suggest that it is about the structure, not the renewable energy. So there is a range to the topic that we are discussing. Dr. Shirashi, what do you think? And so this may be a controversial. Renewable energy and battery storage. Without those two can be suffice. This has been talked about for many years now. And so even if the renewable energy come down in terms of the cost, and so battery storage can be only used for a certain period of time and very high price hydrogen. But the on top of that, from power source, by adding that, system cost could be, well, compares to the renewable energy plus the battery storage alone. If you compare that, there is a major differences in price. And so whether that is a biomass or nuclear, well, it's good to have a storage battery energy unit base. Cost per kilowatt hour is quite high, so you cannot use it for a very long time. So if you add that fact, well, if we curtail the output, and then that could be good. But in the case of Japan, we don't have that much of the abundant renewable energy. So if you say that 100 giga is needed on top of that, and the viability will come down. So a variable renewable energy plus battery storage. I think that alone is not optimal. It should be something else. I think that is a consensus. And there will be additional. And so decarbonization, is it biomass, CCS, CDR, or nuclear? What is the third factor? So LGS, hydrogen. And so could be ammonia, electricity, turn charge hydrogen, and then to electricity. Or so what is needed is something that we need to consider going forward. Thank you. So, in that presentation, it's not just a cost to consider alone, but quantity is something that we need to consider. We need to grow the quantity kilowatt hour. And so, in questions, and so wind power generation construction is not moving forward, although the contract is finalized. A few gigawatt been signed, but construction is not going forward. So 2030 target, what's that target? Is it enough? And so PV and wind. So the speed of deployment of a PV is slowing down, especially the commercial one. And feed-in tariff cost is very low now. So it's not economic anymore. So more and more entities become hesitant and something that you hear. So towards target set for the 2030 and making steady step is also important. As Komurasaki-san said, please don't just focus on Tokyo. So potential of PV and wind, it's not here in Tokyo. It's actually larger potential lie in regional prefectures. And so slow in construction of the wind projects is also to do with the community. This could be the technical issue, but how community can capitalize on renewable energy for the benefit of the local community. What are the potential and what are the challenges is what I'd like to hear from the community point of view. That's very difficult, and when it comes to technical issues, it's very difficult. But one thing I could say is the potential for triggering a national disaster. So in Ikoma city, and there is a Ikoma mountain, and so the wind situation is not so good, although we have a mountain. So that's why we give up. But relationship with the local community is very important. So I'd like to hear everyone. And so EV introduction or the connecting with the grid and setting up the PV is what we're trying to do. But it takes time and we cannot do alone. So we need support from the central government. And so increasing that kind of activity from based upon the grassroots activities and what will be the contribution coming from this and to the nationwide initiative of decarbonization. Well, micro level, of course, we can approach citizens as saying that this will good for the disaster reductions. So it's good to connect it to the grid. So we can start from the smaller things. And so because talking to each household is not something that central government can do. So that's what we're doing. And so what is the significance of what we do pose to the macro level benefit, like a countrywide benefit? If that is visible, and then it will make it easier for our work to talk about the benefits. And so installing a PV like a mega solar farm is not will not be a risk for the natural disaster. Well, setting up the renewable energy facility, wind or PV, and what would be the benefit and that we can communicate to the local community. So Shiraishi-san was the name, was Chikushi-san could also answer to that question. Well, in macro scale, well, that's not my area of expertise, so correct me if I'm wrong. So, and so our mix here in Japan, mainstreaming of the renewable energy, meaning that renewable energy will be the dominant in the future. So PV is growing recently. So growth is slowing down. However, and so FIT or exchange premium. So the portion of the expected portion of the PV is quite large. So making sure that this will be achieved is important. But what's beyond that is wind power generation. And so this is more of the mountainous area.
So this is about a mountainous area. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think we have a good understanding on the part of the community enough. For instance, wind turbine may cause noise and so forth. And the equipment is very large, therefore, we have to spend time to convince them. But I think there are two ways. Taking time to convince people, or if we take too much time, they will just give up. The project will be given up. So, based upon the assumption that the consideration is made on the policy with the level of understanding, and on micro basis, the source of power after the pit is going to be very important. And we are involved in various dialogue with the community. And sometimes, well, of course, utility companies have to answer to all the questions from the residents, but sometimes we're asked to come to the meeting on behalf of the Agency for Natural Resources of Energy. So 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and from the viewpoint of senior citizens living next door, and if the housing is inherited by the grandchildren, PV, whether the PV can be utilized continuously, or is it that the solar panel will be disposed of as a garbage? And once that is made, it should give a contribution to the continuous secure supply of electricity. So they have to will play the role. But when we have interface with the community members, that is going to be the key. What will happen after those years? The current resident, and even though the equipment has some problems, they will be able to conduct maintenance and so forth. But at least if, well, the administration, the local government can have due conversation with the community people, I think it will be very useful. But on macro basis, if you expand that on nationwide basis, it is going to be quite large. Well, I mixed up the two things together, which was not very good. I understand your point. And there are more existing housing compared with newly built housing. But if 20 years, 30 years have passed after the housing is built, people are not quite convinced to install a solar panel on the roof. In the case of Ikoma City, well, for instance, people say that there are so many PVs on the roof, and there are houses which are strong against natural disaster. I hope we will be talked about in such a way, and I hope we will be regarded as a city with so many housing with PVs and measures taken to prevent disasters. And I don't think we can cover 100%, but if we can promote PV installation, I think it will expand beyond the city. And also, I suppose transmission and connection can be done via EV. I think it will go beyond the boundary of the city. And if the impact is not big enough, then I don't know which ministry it will be, mega solar or wind power generation run by the local government located in the city, covering many housings. I think that could be the next step. Do you have such initiative on the part of national government? Well, people are scared about a natural disaster and how we can resolve such concern concerning possible natural disaster by placing PVs. And a potential or the rate of introduction of a solar panel is quite strong. And if there is no more promotion, then the project itself will not be in progress. Is it going to be for the new housing or existing housing? Earlier, Mr. Yasui introduced a material. Pie chart was shown. The JPEA said that they're aiming for 450 gigawatt power generation. Then not just housing, but also for all the roofs of the building, that will be about 10% of the total existing structure. So there is no need to force them to install a solar panel on the old house, but probably if the coverage is about 10%, they can attain 450 gigawatts target. And also by deforestation, solar panels are installed. And because of that, there may be a strong objection. But a 400 gigawatt target without placing those PVs on the existing housing, if we include or introduce other power stations for EVs and so forth, we can help give contribution. So it is not that solar panel be installed on large-scale basis, destroying the nature.
I had raised my hand to come in on the earlier question of the getting community agreement. I think this is a wonderful thing I've learned about in Japan, is the true institutional effort that goes from the national government and from local authorities and developers and everyone else to really get the agreement. I always struggle with translating rikai o eru because there is no great way of translating because it's such a wonderful concept. And I know, having worked on wind power here, that people from NHO go physically to people's fishermen's homes, and I'm in a meeting with them, their phone is ringing and the fisherman from Aomori Ken is calling them, and so I know this is not a theoretical effort, this is real. But the thing I do feel like sometimes we miss here in Japan is the cost of the status quo. And I think it's always a lot easier to perceive the cost of change. And anyone who's ever been stuck behind a construction site that then built an amazing bridge that makes their commute faster knows that you remember the annoyance of the construction site more than you remember the excitement of having that bridge that makes your commute faster. But I think, the cost of, for example, the air pollution of thermal power is real. And in the US, I think we feel the impact of climate change more already. I have relatives who live in California. When I first lived there for a week, I couldn't let my children go outside because the air quality was so bad from the wildfires. My cousin has lived in New Orleans on the coast of Louisiana for over a decade. She just moved to Denver, which is high up, because there were so many catastrophic weather events and such a high risk because of sea level rise of another Hurricane Katrina flooding scenario that the economics of living in New Orleans didn't work for her and her family anymore. And so sometimes I feel the debate here treats climate change a little bit as a future cost. I think that's a luxury we can't afford. And I think coastal communities in Japan and fishermen actually are already feeling the impact of this. And so I think from the American perspective, that may be another part of the answer to yours, is regardless of the politics of climate change, people are feeling it every day.
Thank you. So there was the questions and from the Nemoto, a question to Mayor of Ikoma. So the interest among citizens is not so high. So we need to address the cause of a major natural disaster. So if you approach that aspect, how I think it will work. Yes, of course. So Nara is inland prefecture. So well, it's less vulnerable to climate change impacts, even in Ikoma. So the typhoon is getting stronger, and we can feel the heat. And so you do the survey. So the interest of climate change is like the 24th. And so I think this could go up on the list of interest of citizens. The way to talk and how to tell the story, and that could change the interest of the citizens. So like fire, wildfire, flood. Well, it's not so much happening in Ikoma city, but we can straight ahead talk about this. So just highlight the climate change impact. Yes, I will do that. And so, what's the significance of our initiatives to the macro level, the benefits? That's also something that I like to highlight and communicate to the local community. So, I'd like to pick up some of the question posed from the audience. And so, Miyake-san has posed a question. He's not here, so I would like to read. So listening to Chikushi-san's, and so adjustment of renewable energy is assuming that the thermal power energy is the thermal power plant is doing that. So I think renewable energy can be used to adjusting the variable output coming out of renewable energy. So the same question. So it has been 12 years since FIT is introduced. So 10 plus percentage for the new RE, and so massive introduction of renewable energy is not a success. And so that has to be changed. Not just the cost, but the other system needs to be reviewed. Those are the two comments. Not just about the Jakusan, you could answer to these questions. So first, me. So to the first question, adjusted power. So renewable energy can be used to adjust the power output. Yes, you're right. In Europe, wind power generation is utilized to adjust the power output. I understand that way. So if it's possible, then that is the ideal future scenario. So what we have is a pump hydro and so thermal power plant. We have abundant. That's why we are using them. So because it's cost effective using what is existing. But if we have more wind power plant in the future, I think we can use that for the adjusting purposes. And so using for the adjusting purposes, meaning the capacity factor come down. So it is not go well with the FIT system. And so once you generate, it will be purchased. And that is the story. But if it's not a base load and if it's adjustment power, will not be purchased 100%. So we have to take on this challenge though. But this is for the future. So as of today, we need to start with the wind power project. And so onshore project, there are many, so we need to connect to the grid. So offshore, we need to set up and connect it to the transmission line. And so the second part of the question, I did not find a question in this screen. So the second question, and so the power system restructuring from that perspective, introduction of renewable energy is not advancing. Well, and introducing renewable energy with the support of a feed-in tariff. It was okay back then, but we are using the word mainstreaming the renewable energy. So position renewable energy as a mainstream to support the power system here in Japan for longer term. Of course, that means there may be some troubles. And so sustainability is a key. And so the investment has to be long run. So feed-in tariff, feed-in premium, we cannot just depend on that. It has to be diversified. That's important. So we have to be clever and thinking about the initiatives. I think the discussion for that next phase of deployment of renewable energy is just started. So, Dr. Shiraishi, do you have anything to say? Well, as for the wind power, it could be used as an adjusting power source. But if you look at other countries like US, adjusting power source, I think the battery storage is a winner for the ancillary service. Thermal power, no options. I think the storage battery is a sole winner. And so storage battery, California and Texas are the major place, and 10 gigawatt introduction per year alone in US. And so 10 gigawatt cumulatively been introduced in California alone. So price is coming down significantly. So in Japan, deploying the storage battery is something of the future, but it's not the case in other parts of the world. And when you look at the auctions, the storage battery is the sole winner when it comes to ancillary service. So that's what we hear in the industry. So technological evolution, especially the renewable energy and the storage battery, is quite advanced and quite speedy. 60 giga has been applied to connect to the grid here in Japan. So I think this may disrupt the image that we have today. So renewable energy and storage battery, these are the best combination. So looking at the questions, they are so diverse, so I don't know which one to select. So there's a question about the nuclear power generation, but we want to focus our attention on the renewable energy this time. Kuro-san, are you there?
Online participation, I don't know to whom this is addressed. Is there any plan of introducing the panel on the residence and housing? And this is a very specific question about lowering the cost of installation. Do you have any plan to have a tie-up relationship to go ahead with a demand response by reducing the cost? Is there any way to control demand response? That's a technical matter, and it is difficult for me to answer. But I think we can give explanation to the citizens from their perspective. In the case of Ikoma City, renewable energy sources is not enough in terms of the explanation. And biomass is going to be introduced shortly. And one half can be well offered from the local area. And if we can construct more renewable energy source-based power generation plant, and suppose we can take the method of storing the electricity using storage or EV, I don't know which we should take, and stability of the distribution is ensured, I think that will be very understandable from the viewpoint of citizens. So we would like to aim for concluding everything, including demand response, within Ikoma City. So demand response and storage, how much cost is required, that has to be studied. I think that is interesting concept. And if more municipalities will take that approach, it will expand to very interesting project. There are so many specific questions addressed to Mr. Chikushi. I would like to take up some questions. What is the ground of data center occupying 10%? And also the policies and so forth. I'm sure you're not responsible for everything. So how do you think about the policy design going forward? And in a decarbonization auction and in capacity building, I think there are more usage of energy. So what is the ground of your remarks concerning a data center? And I wonder if you're just helping too much or giving support to a thermal power plant. I think it is better to introduce the concept. First of all, the data center. With the a data center opening, the demand may go up by 10%. And that was presented at the deliberation meeting. And towards the companies or operators of transmission and distribution, and out of the total application, for instance, the high voltage, middle voltage, and low voltage, and if we add up all the high voltage demand, 15 million kilowatt capacity is being applied for. And it depends on how the adjustment coefficient is applied. About it will be about 10% if it is going to be 1.5 million kilowatts. So the location of the site, it's been defined that the connection should be made to that land or to that site. But if they're asked for payment, then some people will withdraw the application. I think the size of the demand may go up. What I wanted to say is that within 10 years, the demand level will go up. And also, some data center operators will go to another country like Taiwan and so forth to create a data center if electricity is not available in Japan. Anyway, we are evaluated quite strictly by IT entities, and I have chances to meet with the top executive of technology companies. And frankly speaking, some people said that if there's no electricity, why we have to be in Japan? So within several years, they have to ensure a significant amount of electricity. So site selection will be very important. For LNG, gas, thermal power plant, for the time being, they have to use the power station as a source of power. And at this point in time, there are many CO2 emitters like steel mills and so forth. But we have to offer the alternative, otherwise they won't be able to continue operations. So LNG may be very important. Of course, we have to reach carbon neutral, but it remains to be an important option before we reach that target. And my understanding is that there is no distraction from other countries' principle. Thank you very much. I think there are many important points. And in auction of CO2, I think a gas thermal power plant was introduced. And suppose LNG, gas, and coal will be stopped at this point in time, it is going to be very difficult to suffice the demand. Then, new thermal power plant. In this situation, I think I am surprised to hear that creating another thermal power plant, well, there will be a rise in the number of data centers and higher efficient society driven by AI. And I think they will contribute to the reduction of the demand of electricity. I really hope that there will be no increase in the amount of thermal power plants. Once the thermal power plant is constructed, then they cannot just stop operation and using that plant. And I hope there will be a shift towards renewable energy source. Well, time is passing very quickly. We have to conclude the meeting. And we're talking about renewable energy sources, and we talked about in the materials. And by grasping the benefits of a renewable energy as a main source of power, we would like to develop more discussion. I think there is a wide difference between Japan and the United States because Japan is relying heavily on imported energy sources. And in terms of expanding a domestically made power plant in Japan, we see no alternatives other than renewable energy source. And supply chain graph was shown, and we're considering what will be essential sort of food for the industry. And it is necessary to create new industries for Japan. So the renewable energy will offer chances to create new industry going forward. So I would like to ask a final comment concerning what you consider based upon renewable energy, a shift towards renewable energy as a main source of power. What are the challenges that Japan has to overcome?
And also, each one of you, from your position, and so mainstreaming of renewable energy towards that goal, what can you do? So, food for thought or some tips, if you could highlight some of those things, will be appreciated in order. And so, one more thing I'd like to encourage you to do is, it will be your mainstream, about 2030 target. 36 to 38% for the RE and 41% for the thermal. So the thermal is still large. And of course, that needs to shift in order in the future, but 70 to 80% should be attained, like or 90% in 2030 or 2040. Of course, there are some companies who strive to achieve that. 36, 37. And so shifting to a position with that and 41. So the strength of renewable energy is not strong enough to replace with the thermal power in that percentage-wise. So I'd like to hear why. And so I'm sorry for asking so much questions, but starting from the Mr. Komurasaki, please. Thank you. Sorry for mixing up all the opinions. And so renewable energy And so starting initiative from the local governments that is unshakable. So we would like to be the leader in such a way. So I just renewed my commitment to do that today. So decarbonization, urban development, combining those together to communicate to citizens is one thing, but also another way, promotion of the renewable energy and decarbonization is also something that we would like to face direct, and that is a civic pride. And so commuter town and CO2 emission reduction and improving the introduction of renewable energy from that local community is something that I would like to determine to do. So, and so demand response and local electric power companies, agency, and all those case studies that I have shared, because we have a close communication with the citizens day in, day out. And so the citizen come forward with the new ideas. And so there's a relationship with the citizens and power companies. And so I'm very close to citizens. And so the trustworthy relationship with the citizens is something that we need to nurture in our everyday life. And so the significance of renewable energy, it should be communicated so many times so that that will be convincing to the wider audience. And so steady step is necessary. And so in 10 years or the 15 years time, and so we want to encourage, and so the households to install PV panels or the set up a EV as a storage, and so that those residential areas can accommodate all these PV panels, all of them. And those are the ideal states. And we should be the one to demonstrate that ideal state and disseminate to the rest of the country. Thank you. Thank you, Shiraishi-san. That is a very tough question. I was wondering, and it's difficult to summarize. So percentage-wise, I do a lot of calculation. And so power tariff, to reduce the power tariff in 2040, renewable energy, 60-70% should be secured by renewable energy. Otherwise, it will be difficult because it's high. If we could do so, the electricity bill will come down. So how to increase the volume? There are many bottlenecks. So it's difficult to move forward. Having said so, there is a breakthrough. Of course, cannot address everything all at once, but there are several opportunities. And so PV panel rooftop version, that's economically beneficial in many ways. So that's the breakthrough, unless we change the system. So we can go as far as we can go with that. And so offshore wind to Japan, offshore wind is very important. And energy self-sufficiency. With that, we could go up to 80%. There's a potential for reaching 80% energy self-sufficiency just with the offshore wind, according to our research. And so energy stockpiling is another concept, and also energy security way. This could be a major tool. So promoting offshore wind in various ways is very important.
To go back to your question about the challenges Japan has to overcome for renewables and some of the industrial opportunities, I think my answer is the same, which is to shift the debate to what we're talking about today, which is the opportunities and the benefits. I feel in the energy debate in Japan, there are so many people who have expertly dealt with fuel supply chains and with establishing the LNG market. There's a forward-thinking approach and a comfort with the risk of that, which is, a risk of price volatility, international supply chains with unreliable countries. There is really downsides to being dependent on fuels that everyone here, people are expert in and have become comfortable with. And there's a real sense of opportunity on new fuels like hydrogen-derived fuels that also includes this acceptance of risk, price volatility, and other risks. On renewable energy, I feel like the emphasis is always, there's a discomfort with the risk, and then a sense that it's too late or Japan's not a first mover. I think there's a real benefit to not being a first mover sometimes. In the US, there's a lot of wind contracts that are in trouble. You can just read the news because the contracts didn't account for inflation. That is a lesson that Japan doesn't have to learn the hard way. And so there's real, instead of, that doesn't mean wind power doesn't work. It just means that Japan doesn't have to pay for learning that lesson now. And so what I hope for you all in this discussion is to really be able to focus on that because, and I think sometimes voices from outside Tokyo are much more, much stronger on that. In Hokkaido, I think there's excitement about co-locating data centers with renewable energy potential that hasn't yet been built out. That's an exciting opportunity for new industry. I've been down in the Goto Islands where this is a community where young people have been leaving for generations and now they're coming back because of the floating offshore wind industry has provided a new economic basis. And the Nagasaki prefecture officials who flew there to meet with me and for the sushi, apparently, they told me that they thought floating offshore wind was the single most important thing that could revitalize Nagasaki's shipping industry. That's not my talking point. That's people from Nagasaki prefecture looking at the old industrial base falling away and looking what can replace it. And so I think the sense of opportunity is real, and I would love for that to be more reflected in the national debate.
Thank you very much. Based upon renewable energy, we have been having discussion, and I took the opportunity during the session to give a comment. And from my viewpoint, this is something that we are anyway go ahead with, making renewable energy as a main source of power. And connecting to a transmission line. There are a difficult situation in Japan. And what becomes the key is that this should be done for a long period of time continuously. And I think we have to talk with the community members. And I wanted to talk about how we can ensure transmission and distribution. Now we have a current project and the new projects of offshore wind power generation, and they need to be connected. And what can be done should be done. And system-wise, of course, we may have to review things that we had in the past, and there is no way but to review. But as for the forecast, it is very difficult for me to give. Things were different 6 months ago. I could have mentioned a forecast, but I don't know exact figures. So now, at this point in time, it is very difficult for me to give the outlook. It would have been a news if you mentioned your forecast. I think it is very important that you mentioned that. Anyway, we will go ahead. A new challenge or creating new technology, they are required. So whether you're going to do it or not, this is a matter of anyway going ahead with this concept. In energy basic policy, I think it is necessary to mention clearly that the government is making a positive move. So making renewable energy as a main source of power, that could be a main objectives. And for this end, the offshore wind power generation need to be improved to achieve higher efficiency. And in order to do so, the policy have to be reviewed and necessary investment be made and review the investment, whether it was made towards the most appropriate area. So I think it will be very important to continuously make improvement. So I hope the session will provide the clues for your thoughts going forward. And we would like to reorganize what we have discussed today. And as Elizabeth mentioned, there are possibilities, potentials for a renewable energy. And well, we might say that we have not been made the comprehensive view. So in different areas, we have to have a different perspective in talking about renewable energy. And we really hope that we will be very realistic in going ahead with a plan. And in a favorable form, I hope that energy transition will be in progress in Japan, and not only in Japan, but also on a global basis. And with this, I would like to conclude the session. Thank you very much for your cooperation, participating in a very difficult questions. Thank you very much. Once again, now we see renewable energy becoming a main source of power appearing on the horizon. Once again, Elizabeth, Dr. Shiraishi, and Mr. Chikushi, Ms. Hirata, the moderator, let us give a big hands of applause. And of course, the Komurasaki. We received so many comments, advice, and comments over the web as well. We were able to have very active discussion in the sessions. With regards to renewable energy, we received different views, and public comment will start. And the decision made by the government will give a major impact to our day-to-day life. And as was mentioned by Ms. Hirata, well, we are participate in Climate Integrate. We are continue to hold this type of seminars and all the activities so that we will be able to give contribution to the compiling of the policy. And you're asked to fill in the questionnaire sheet. And if you close the Zoom, you'll be able to see the QR code. With this, we would like to conclude the session. Thank you very much for your attention for a long period of time.